Hello and welcome back to Logical Magic, Examining Esoterica. Hey guys, today I have an episode for you about self-discipline, where it falls in our spiritual journey, how we can undertake it and learn what it really is, because our culture tells us that self-discipline is all about the grind and pushing yourself to do more and more and more. Self-discipline exists in many different levels of life, including knowing when to do less. And to talk about this, my friend Jacob Fluharty is joining me again. Hey, Jacob, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you? Thanks.
I'm doing fine. Jacob has been working like he is owned by his employer. And so he's a little bit low energy, and I am going to be bringing the bulk of the energy for this episode. And to start, let's get the housekeeping out of the way because I got to do it at the top. All right, I'm Alane. You can find me at therisingmoon.com if you want to book me for a tarot card reading or a life coaching session. You can find me there. It's the only way to book me. You can find Jacob at Southern Style Readings on Facebook or southernstylereadings@gmail.com. You can also find me at Cronecast at the Rising Moon. That is my YouTube channel. The video versions of these podcasts are always up on there. If you're dying to see what we look like, there's going to be the video version there. I have a Patreon where I do weekly readings. I do some cord cutting magic. I do all kinds of things for the people in my Patreon. You might want to check it out. And if you join it, I'd be glad to have you there. Let's get talking about today's episode, which is self-discipline. And for people who have been recovering from past trauma, sometimes from childhood, sometimes from punishing relationships, self-discipline gets conflated with the idea of self-criticism. And it is not that. It is to be able to achieve anything, even healing, you need to be disciplined in your approach to things. So for instance, developing a meditative practice, which is key to being able to heal things like anxiety disorders or bring them into a managed state, requires discipline, the ability to follow through, to be able to follow through on that which is good for you, which is really what self-discipline is about. For people who've been trying to overwrite a punishing inner dialogue, often programmed into them by punishing caretakers or hypercritical parents, some of us have both, it can be very difficult to understand how to maintain a self-supporting, self-disciplined dialogue without it turning towards beratement, like where you just call yourself names. You can be self-disciplined without ever saying anything unkind to yourself. But sometimes, particularly on a healing journey, and particularly on one that's trying to bring us success, whatever form success might take for you, self-discipline is a crucial element of it. So how do we begin to develop it? And to start, we're going to go over to Jacob. And Jacob, what's your relationship to the idea of self-discipline? What's it mean to you?
My relationship with it is tenuous at best, as you probably know. I have all these really great ideas of, things that I want to do for myself or practices I want to, be a part of, partake in, or things that would be super helpful, like meditative practices or like the discipline to like have a set routine of, my day or a cleaning schedule or whatever. But I just never seem to be able to, form that habit, which for me personally leads to this kind of cycle of, be really excited about it, give it a shot. It works really good for a couple of days and then it falls apart and then the self-loathing kicks in and then the negativity spiral kicks in and then we're just hit zero all over again. So yeah, tenuous at best, I would say.
That I think is part of the beginning stages of a healing journey as well. And please remember that, like, you have to be willing to tell yourself when something really isn't for you. And
Mm.
honest to goodness, that is something that people will hear about, something that they know to be good for other people. And I will use myself as an example here, yoga. I don't like yoga. Like, I like exercising. I talk about how much I exercise all the freaking time. I really dig exercising, weightlifting, rock climbing, hiking, I love exercise. I do not like yoga. It does not fit my personal comfort level. And for time periods of my life, I kept trying to force myself to it because movement, which is what yoga helps maintain, is all about being in flow. And then I realized that there were about 15 different other ways of being in flow that included fluid movement, flexibility, and the ability to move your body at will in the direction that you wish it to go in, that did not involve the stillness of yoga. I don't hold still well, and I have a permanent injury that affected my balance. And it's something I've been trying trying to regain my entire life. But that does tie back into self-discipline. Years ago, and I mean like 20, more than 20 years ago, I had a car accident and it was a head-on collision. From my perspective, I am fine, even though there was not an airbag in the car that I was in. I actually had very few injuries, but the ones that I had were very serious in terms of bone breaks. I broke most of my left hand and I pulverized. It was a word, you do not want the word pulverized associated with your bones, but I managed to pulverize my right heel. And that meant that I had to be in a wheelchair for 4 months. And that, because of opposite side body breaks, it had to be able to heal. And it required over a year and a half of physical therapy. And they basically told me I was going to limp for the rest of my life. As I've just outlined, I'm actually incredibly active. I don't limp any longer. I have a small balance difference because I worked on it and I worked on it and I worked on it. And so self-discipline, where I did not give myself permission to give up on making gains, even though it took a really long time to regain my balance. That's a good example of self-discipline. But a bad example of self-discipline is comparing yourself to other people and thinking that you need to do what they're doing, which is a little bit what you're talking about, Jacob, when you're like meditating. If it doesn't work for you at this present time, there's a reason. And there's something else that you can do that can help achieve the same level of connectivity. For people with ADHD, for instance, they can be in a meditative space while you're doing something called stimming, where you're like spilling off excess energy, doodling on something as we do something else. And that can be a very meditative
Mhm.
state for you. Find a practice that actually fits you, because you need to have an affinity for whatever it is that you're trying to discipline yourself towards. And then you have to have reasonable expectations, because I don't want to blow anybody's mind here, but self-discipline can also be about being self-disciplined means maintaining a healthy work-life balance. The discipline does not actually mean forcing yourself to do unpleasant things. It means being able to adhere to healthy protocols, boundaries, routines, and systems that will then bring you the results that you're hoping to get. And what you do need to recognize is that if you do not like something, you will not stick with it. Now, because of what I do and because I need a little bit more guidance, and because I really wanted to find a peaceful place in my mind, I stuck with meditating all the way through. This is hard for me, but it does make me feel better. And now I meditate really, really, really well. I can just sit down. It's like there's no big preamble to it, and I can clear my mind very easily, which happens to me in the middle of the night. I'll wake up and I'm able to clear my mind because I developed that practice. And it was the thing that was keeping me from resting, is immediately my mind would go on and start talking to me about all the stuff I needed to do. And it was only through a disciplined practice that I learned to be able to have the self-discipline over where my thoughts were going to go. Self-discipline goes into things like the idea of manifesting and the law of attraction. When people talk about not allowing themselves negative thoughts, if you have processed all your past trauma, then you really do have the ability to say, I'm choosing the direction that I'm going to go in. But you do have to heal first. Before you can not have negative anything, you have to be able to deal with the accumulation of negative emotions, damage, or trauma that you have been repressing. You have to be in a balanced state in order to be able to choose effectively. In our hustle culture that tells us that success means having more and more stuff that we spend more and more money on that supports an economy, when we hear the word self-discipline, it usually means about doing more and working harder. But for people who are healing, when we're talking about self-discipline, it is the discipline to adhere to a healing practice that is right for you. And for some people, it can be walking. For some people, it can be swimming. For some people, it can be doodling. For some people, it can be doing pottery. It is the thing that gives you the space to simply be with yourself, to be at peace, to restore, and to recharge. So discipline isn't always about doing more. Sometimes discipline is about being able to discipline yourself into doing less, to doing fewer things. Because most of the times when people are getting things like career and success readings from me, they want to know what more they should do and what they should be doing. And a lot of the times the answer is, you're actually doing too much. You're doing so much that you're exhausted and you're not getting any quality of life out of this experience. And you're trying to work with your guides, and your guides are going to block you on anything that is depleting you and ruining your health over time. And so if they're telling you, you need to have hobbies, you need to have friends, you need to have passions, you need to have pursuits, you need to relax, you need to play, You need to be able to express your creative side when you're trying to manifest. If the only way that you can approach that to make time for yourself is in a self-disciplined manner, okay, that is perfect. Treat it as a homework assignment in which you are the project that you're trying to complete. On a healing journey, we will always, always be asked to do things that are outside of our comfort zone. And when we are dwelling outside of our comfort zone, that is where the idea of self-discipline, which is the idea of self-regulation, when we're talking about healing trauma, many trauma survivors deal with difficulties with emotional regulation because they have a lot of compounded trauma. And until they have confronted that and dealt with it and understood what it did to them, when they have an emotion, sometimes it's too big and it causes emotional regulation issues. But self-discipline is actually at the heart of, what am I going to say? Responding and not reacting. You have to be in a disciplined space where you make your well-being your chief discipline. And I used to refer to celestial and angelic magic as the discipline I followed, but people didn't understand that a discipline is a ritual. It is a discipline, it is a practice. And it is not about forcing yourself to exhaust yourself in pursuit of a societal goal, but in choosing wisely for yourself. It isn't about being a Marine. It can often be about being able to be your own comforter, your own kind person, your own best friend. You can have self-discipline around having a more positive dialogue within and how you talk to yourself. Too many people approach self-discipline as the stuff that they use to beat themselves up with, when self-discipline is actually about being in a regulated, controlled, and healthy, balanced energy. And learning how to talk to yourself effectively when you're talking about self-discipline is one of the key things that will help promote it. And, Jacob, when you when you didn't take to meditating, like some of the things that you were talking about, you have this underlying current of talking about yourself negatively, but it just wasn't the right approach for a peaceful state for you. But you do have things that you do that bring you to a more peaceful state. So when you have a slightly negative connotation around self-discipline, can you tell me why that is?
Um, I'm not sure that I completely understand, other than like I have always been like super hard on myself, and if I'm not achieving results the way that I think that they should be achieved, and so if I'm trying to practice something, or get something started that doesn't achieve those results in a time frame, then the whole thing just kind of falls apart. So I see things a little bit more negatively, just because I've always been very hard on myself, because the external influences on my life have always been very results driven, and so when the results aren't there, then I don't have anything to, like, the validation is not there either. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, if you're not able to achieve, then then it's not worth it.
Okay.
Which is, managing expectations. I think you bring that up, is very important. It's what I strive to work on. It's very difficult, going into things with managed expectations.
Well, I think maybe reframing the idea that self-discipline isn't about failure or success, but rather inhabiting
Mm,
energy that supports your well-being rather than detracts from it. And it's not about achievement, it's about well-being. And
yeah.
can it then,
Mhm,
be the key component towards success? Yes, it can. But success is not success if you're doing punishing things to yourself. Success is
mhm,
not success if all you ever do is work. All you ever do, like talk to these people who are in startups or and all they ever do is focus on their business. And it's like, you're gonna burn out. You're gonna burn out and your immune system can crash. There's enough time to do things at a rate that is not harming you. And if it is harming you, then by the time you actually achieve it, you will have a millstone around your neck rather than a bouquet that you're carrying in a victory parade. And to try and to remember that self discipline is not synonymous with self punishment. Discipline is not punishment. Even though we talk about disciplining our kids or in training an animal, knowing how to discipline them appropriately. Discipline is about the ability to control our outcomes through our exertion of will. And it does not have to be unkind. It does not have to be punishing, and it does not have to be something at which failure or success is at the root of it, but rather well-being is the thing that we're trying to achieve. And that when we don't do as well as we might want to, our self-dialogue is something that we can be disciplined about. And that is the like the best spiritual application of the idea of self-discipline, is that we use it in order to heal rather than to control. And that,
Mm.
so that when you're talking to yourself, you have a discipline. I'm very disciplined in how I talk to myself. If I catch myself saying something negative, I immediately stop what I'm doing and I say 3 positive things. And even if it feels phony as can be in the moment, it changes the direction of my thoughts, because I was raised by punishing caretakers and hypercritical people. And I was bullied. And so my inner dialogue can turn towards this thing where I'm just picking the flesh from my own bones if I'm not careful. I have to be very disciplined about, what am I thinking about? How am I thinking it? How am I addressing myself within my head? And the discipline does not come around in punishing myself or you just said something you shouldn't to yourself, bad girl. It comes in where when I catch myself, I have developed a discipline, a set of circumstances or a set of routines that will bring me back into the parameters and into the direction that I wish to head, that is healthier, happier, and in all manner of things more connected and more peaceful. But I have to be disciplined about it, because it is something that I learned that was not part of my nurturing experience. As another way to approach the idea of discipline in anything that you do, because healing takes discipline. Everybody I know is trying to heal something. And it's partially because this is what I do for a living. That's what this podcast is about, is we're all trying to heal something. And only through a disciplined application of different techniques and different modes of addressing oneself and approaching oneself can we get a different result. But it doesn't mean that when you don't adhere to the routines or the building blocks or the foundation that you're laying, that you've done something wrong. Instead, it is you catch yourself, you speak to yourself as kindly and as firmly as possible. Hey, that's not going to help. Let's do a different thing. It does not actually, because it has been co-opted by the world of business, where everything is either about you making bank or you're an abject failure. Like there's no, hey, listen, maybe my life isn't about business. This is the money I make to pay my bills and sustain my life. But like it doesn't contain my identity and it doesn't have much of my purpose in it. And like obviously mine does, but not everybody's needs to. Is to remember that discipline is not about punishment. And that if your approach to the idea of self-discipline is about self-punishment, that's what you need to be disciplined about. You need to have a disciplined approach to how you speak to yourself to get a different result. No matter whether or not you might have previously judged yourself as a success or a failure for adhering to or not adhering to a protocol around healing or meditating or anything else, the discipline comes in not just in adhering to the steps that are taken, but the discipline comes in changing the way that you do something to be more beneficial. Discipline is about choosing that which is beneficial and healthy over that which is destructive. And that's really what discipline is meant to be about. It really is not about punishment. It is about being able to have willpower that you exert for your own good. Now, can discipline be taken in a completely negative direction? Yeah, sure. Anything can be taken in a completely negative direction, pretty much. But we're not talking about that. We're trying to talk about the spiritual worth of self-discipline and how to apply it, particularly when you have been damaged in some way that makes you berate yourself rather than cheer yourself on. And in fact, being disciplined about saying positive things to yourself can have a tremendous reward with it. And try and stop approaching discipline or doing anything with the idea that success or failure is at the root of it, but rather that you are trying to be disciplined so that you get an improved life experience. And it does not have to be about money, and it does not have to be about achieving degrees, but it has to be about your overall well-being and health, to try and be disciplined around that. It's like, not eating cookies all day long because you're supposed to have vegetables as well to live a healthy experience. But if you have a day where all you eat is cookies, then just the next day you make up for it by being extra what disciplined in what you ingest and what you do. So reapproaching some too many things that are not meant to be a negative have been turned into a negative in a way to be self-punishing. Our societies don't like it when we like ourselves too much because then we are no longer conforming to whatever structure that they have put forth that are telling us to inhabit so that they can get the results out of us that they want. Support the economy, do this, work, 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 work. It supports the economy. It makes rich people richer. That doesn't do much for you. When we're really talking about self-discipline, it is in being disciplined enough to follow your own guidance towards that which is your best life and your most purposeful experience. And for some people, it will be working 24/7 because they're inventors or they're scientists or they're researchers. There are a lot of things that allow for an individual expression of what your best energy is. And that the idea of self discipline, if you react to it negatively, you do not understand what it is meant to do in your life because it is meant to make things better. It is not meant to make you feel smaller. It is supposed to help you flourish and grow and become the best version of yourself that you can be. And it does sometimes involve self-denial of like, hey, I would like to eat cookies all day, but it's not good for me, so I didn't.
Mhm.
Sometimes there are substances can come into play as well. Discipline is not always about denial, but there is denial inherent in the idea of discipline because it is having the exertion of a logical will over your shadow side, your ego side. It is the ability to say, no, I've chosen to do what is good for me. And if I stray off that path occasionally, I'll remind myself, and sometimes in tougher terms than others, but never unkind ones, that it's time to get back with the program. And that's what discipline is. So, Jacob, dude, can you like what's been your historical relationship to discipline in terms of what you thought it meant and what you think it means now? And has there been any change?
Well, I mean, like discipline. Like, you keep talking about like exertion of will, and that's where my deficit is. I think like I've never had this, this big well of willpower to draw from, or if I do, it's pretty weak. Like I'm very peer pressure is big, and like, yeah, I'm easy to throw off of the trail. Like, I've had a stack of to-do lists that needed to be accomplished for weeks now that I just cannot seem to muster any kind of willpower to go after. And so I guess that's becomes like my problem. And I guess my question is like, what do we do with this, this feeling of I have things that I need to get done, but I just do not have any of the necessary like willpower to get any of it done. Like, how do I drum up that willpower to even begin walking that first step to do anything?
Okay.
Um,
Well, I totally get what you're saying, and like, of course, like Jacob and I know each other outside of the podcast, like where we are like aware of like events in each other's lives and everything. I can tell you 100% that you do not lack willpower; you lack energy because you're working too much.
oh, there's that. Okay, fair enough.
And so, like, the
Uh,
the answer is like, well, it's not that you lack discipline, it's that you lack the ability to have limitless and bottomless energy. Now, where discipline might come in is like, maybe your diet could be improved and you'd have more energy from that, maybe. But that's only you're going to know that for sure. But sometimes the things that we're criticizing ourselves for, it's like the perspective, the taking a step back to see is this really my failure? Or is this the idea that like, how many hours did I work last week? Because how many hours did you work last week, dude?
a lot.
Lots.
Well more than 40. Well more than 40. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so you have this to-do list because there's a finite amount of time and you have a finite amount of energy. And that like in the discipline thing that we're talking about, which is not about getting things done, but living in a better and a healthier energy, is to look at your task list to understand are all the necessities being the dogs walked, the cats fed, that you're meeting all essential necessities, but that there is a good reason that you're running short on energy to accomplish your to-do list because too much of your time is currently committed to, and like I'm not criticizing that at all. It's you got to meet your responsibilities, you got a job, you're doing it. But that there's an external factor that is actually nothing to do with your willpower, but rather with the fact that bodies need rest and that too much energy is being claimed by your work and your life doesn't have very good balance in it. And so in that instance, the discipline would come in I am in a disciplined manner choosing to have self-compassion for myself and to not beat up on myself when there's a clear and obvious reason as to why, because you don't need to be disciplined about your to-do list. Be disciplined about your emotional well-being and everything else falls into line. Because there's no point nor good reason for you to feel bad about yourself when there is a very obvious, it's like you said it, and I'm like, well, dude, you work like 60, 70 hours a week sometimes. You're working a lot, and I know why you're doing it, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just that maybe be nice to you because I can spot it, and that's the discipline is when you are considering your relationship to whether or not you're failing or succeeding at something, is to stop defining everything by what you think you're doing wrong, and instead take that step out because disciplined approaches are also about I'm going to pretend I'm looking at somebody else experiencing this to see if I can see any external factors because you're not a weak-willed person. I like everybody gives into impulses a little bit, but like you're a reliable human being. You show the heck up sometimes even when you don't feel all that well. You're a disciplined person. It's just that your relationship to the idea of discipline has to do with what you are doing, when sometimes the relationship to discipline is what you allow yourself not to do because there's a good reason.
And I guess that's the mindset shift that I need to experience because that's the only way that I see this like discipline conversation. It's like I only perceive it through the lens of the things that I'm not able to do, and I very rarely am able to like quantify the things that I am doing or have done in a way that's meaningful. Like I look around my room right now, like the space that I inhabit currently, and I can see like a million things that need to get done, but I don't have like I guess time. Yeah, I just run out of time, and I have to reframe like my mindset on like not feeling bad about again this just goes back to that achieving. There's no achievable results here. So, like, it's just there is no. I feel like I'm lacking in discipline because these things are not being done. Like, because I'm doing X instead of Y, or whatever.
Well,
So yeah, we just have to work on, I guess, mind shifts.
because again, I just, and why is it so important? Because it is a form of discipline. It is about applying like a template upon something and making sure that you hit within those parameters. But the first self-discipline, the one that will aid your life, the one that will aid your relationships, the one that will aid your success, is actually in how you treat and approach yourself first. Because if you're taking good care of yourself, then you will get optimal results in other areas. And that to give yourself a break is also part of a discipline, is understanding that human beings need rest, human being needs fun. Nobody is like, all work and no play. Will actually not, it won't make you a dull boy, it'll make you a mentally ill one over the course of time, and that applies to anybody. Is that we do best when we prioritize our happiness appropriately in basically in balance with our responsibilities, and that discipline is about responsibility, but it is not to the greater world first, it is to our interior world so that we can get our optimal results. And the reason that I like it's like reclaiming the world discipline for something that is more, because I've been told throughout the course of my life, I'm always described as a very disciplined person because I really do. I push myself. I have always been prone to that. But one of the things that I had to push myself towards was having a kinder dialogue within, making sure that I had a work, because I would work 24/7 if my guides didn't do weird things to me to get me to stop sometimes. I mean, I've had really weird things happen, like to just like it feels like something throwing up roadblocks to keep me from doing things. until I was choosing in a way where I was disciplined about my mental, emotional, and physical well-being, that it was like all the discipline in the world to get things done was about what other people would think of me versus what I would think of my life. And that if you're talking about self-discipline, this is something that we're talking about that you want to claim for yourself first and forget what other people might think of the circumstances. Your job is to be the best version of yourself that you can be, the healthiest version of yourself you can be. And sometimes that really will involve letting yourself off the hook for, yeah, things are piling up, but there is a clear and obvious, could see it from space reason. It's like, well, currently, understaffed, working too much. It makes sense. And that the discipline would not be in, why can't you get that done? Why don't you have more energy? But the discipline for you would be in, I am in a disciplined fashion learning to be more self-forgiving, self-loving, self-understanding, and that I prioritize my well-being over whether or not somebody else would walk into my apartment and say that I think that this is a really good place and that you've got it all under control. Because if you feel good within, then your exterior world has tendency to, you'll find more energy. But secondly, if we hand our self-esteem to other people in that manner, where what our life looks like to them and whether or not we're accomplishing what we're supposed to, it will always be handed back to us in a dented shape because other people have their own stuff and their own agendas. And they're not looking at things from what's best for you, but you need to be the person who is disciplined enough to be able to choose in service of your highest good, of your best emotional health, and in your best ability to produce and contribute. And there are people who really, really want to produce and contribute. I am one of them. But that I can do that to my own detriment and it can be admired by others. Look at her go, whereas it's doing terrible things to me. So what is really self-discipline there? Self-discipline there would be in me taking care of myself and releasing the need to have anybody else's judgment matter to me. If you want to be a self-disciplined person, understand that you may be different than other people. You are talking about your individual needs and your individual goals and your individual challenges. And that when we're talking about discipline, it really is about applying a template for success to your inner world. And it might not look like what other people think success is, but if it makes you happier, it's successful. We need to understand that many things that can be used in a fully positive connotation, we have a tendency to turn towards self-punishment. Part of the reason that I wanted to talk about the idea of being self-disciplined is because we think of it as being punishment, of judgment of self, instead of it being, hey, listen, this is a routine of life that you can follow, and it will take discipline because you will have to actively choose it. Free will is something that we're given. We're given all the choices in the world within reason. Within reason, like your circumstances, your economic circumstances, your health, a bunch of other things can limit your choices. But throughout the course of our day, and in tarot, it's the minor arcana versus the major arcana, our life is built by our choices. When we're talking about discipline, it is about choosing the ones that are best for us in a disciplined manner, meaning that, like, as a for instance, I used to smoke. It's been a really long time since I smoked at this point, and I'm not somebody who's craved it in the aftermath. But when I quit, I quit. Whenever I quit something, I quit. I'm never a go back type of person. I'm not a relapse kind of gal on anything, because I'm very, very, very disciplined. But that discipline is really in its best incarnation something that we apply to ourselves to make our lives better, not other people approve of us. And there is one of these semantic arguments that when it clicks for you, it becomes much more easy to start viewing yourself as a disciplined person. Whereas if you view it from the lens of what other people will judge you as being, you can turn it as a weapon against yourself. But you can be a fully disciplined person and it won't look like what other people want it to, but it keeps your personal house and your emotional well-being in order. So it really is kind of a reclamation of a word that has been co-opted to be about self-punishment rather than self.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely a negative word in this house.
Well, and like, again, do I ever like Oscar, my big dog who occasionally appears on camera? Puddles died last December, so she hasn't been on in a while because she's off in another world. She was a wonderful, wonderful dog. She was old enough to drive, and it was sad, but she had a happy life. Now, Oscar occasionally has gotten so much attention since then because he's the sole focus of my energy that every now and then he will decide that I need to pay attention to him in the middle of working. I mean, I've really got a
Mhm.
client here, and there's an element of, go lie down. I'm not gonna say it really loud because he's still in this room. I don't want him to think he's in trouble. But discipline can sound like that. It can sound like authority. But we have a problem where we treat words that don't actually mean the same thing as being synonymous. And authority and discipline are not the same thing. But we have a tendency to confuse the two. Is that if we're not self-disciplined, we think that, like, there's an authority involved and we need to be self-punishing around it. So I can speak to my dog with authority, but I'm not disciplining him necessarily. It's just I'm being disciplined about what I need to do. And the reason
Mhm.
it's so important is that at the root of it, at the root of our ability to make healthy choices, to heal trauma, to take the steps to not ignore red flags, to make sure we have a healthy work-life balance, so we pay attention to our mental well-being as well as our physical well-being. At the root of that is the need to be disciplined in our choices. But we don't know how to be disciplined because we have a tendency to associate it with, again, a form of punishment. And to remember that it really is about something that a true discipline gives you better results. And that when it comes to self discipline, the best forms that you can choose are about promoting and increasing your wellness and making sure that the habits that you're in, that you're good to yourself as well. That self-discipline can also be like, hey, make sure you celebrate your own birthday. Even if you don't have anybody else around, treat yourself right, buy yourself a present, be kind to yourself. Be disciplined in what you do, and you will start getting better results. But be careful where you invest the idea of where you need to be disciplined to make sure it's right for you. Make sure that it's in service of your good. And when you're working in service of your own good, it doesn't mean that you never consider other people's needs. Like, honest to goodness, you can be somebody who is a servant of the people and still be very self-disciplined, knowing that you have a finite amount of energy to give to others, and you need to have healthy boundaries around what you give to others, which I have to deal with that all the time. That it prevents burnout when we're disciplined. When we're disciplined, it can prevent a great many health problems because it has to do with making sure we exercise appropriately. But if you're really genuinely hurt or tired or overworked, or you simply need a day to goof off, that can also come under the heading of self-discipline when your discipline is about wellness, about emotional health. Reclaim these words that are about power because that's what it's really about. Discipline and authority and a couple of other things are really about claiming our power. And so that's why it's important to start to turn it around and look at it in a way that it's like, okay, I've used this against me as a battering ram. How can I use it for me as a thing that will help support and sustain me and act as a foundation? Because discipline is best as a foundation for getting the results out of your life that you want. But too many people turn it into a tool to beat themselves up on. And listen, once you start doing that, it's really hard to get out of that loop. The first thing to do is, if you really want to be a more disciplined person, is be kind in how you speak to yourself. Be disciplined in that, and your whole world will start to transform. Give yourself credit when you're doing the best that you can. Give yourself credit when you're overworked, but you're still getting the dog fed. You're doing the best you can. And discipline comes in where maybe you're not, and you need to remind yourself to do it. But it's an important word because it does have to do with how we direct our will. And our will is our power, and our power is the thing that makes everything that we do in this life possible. So I don't know, it's one of those, again, a little bit of a semantic argument, but these words that carry with them a connotation of power, when you want to reclaim self and you want to rebuild self, reclaim the vocabulary around it and change the way that you're looking at the things that you think you know. Because in the idea of discipline is freedom and health and happiness if you apply the idea of discipline in the ways that serve you rather than serve others. So,
Mhm.
Jacob,
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's a reframing of from like seeing it from an external to an internal self-discipline. I guess I've always looked at through the lens of like an external validation upon, like what I'm doing with my life or whatever. So, I mean, I never really thought about it in the other sense. So, it's a good practice to undertake, to kind of see it from my perspective instead of the perspective of others, onto myself.
I know so many people who are incredibly disciplined, but they do it to the point of being self-punishing because they think that's about strength of character. And
Hmm.
sooner or later, that breaks a person. And so it's a much better idea to understand that, yes, I am disciplined. If others people have seen me as disciplined, I possess the ability to be disciplined. But a better use of that energy would to be disciplined around my health and happiness and my achievement as well. Because your life is meant to contain that. And so often when I'm talking to people, they're angry with their guides or they're angry with the circumstances and like because they feel like they're at the whim of something else's choices. But the choice is within your control, but sometimes you have to change your perspective on what your choices really are. And honest to goodness, reframing things to understand that if discipline is about power, because it really is and how you apply it, what do you really want out of your life? What do you really, and this is not, I'm like, this is just a generalized universal question to people is if you want to know how to start applying discipline to your life, ask yourself, and there's no wrong answer, it's your answer. You get to have your very own answer. What do you really want out of your life? And then ask yourself why. Because if it is a big car, if it is a big, like, please ask yourself why. If it has to do with what other people will think of you, know that you will never truly have control over that. And so that a better use of your personal power is so that you will feel as if you like yourself, as if you are supportive of yourself, as if you can be capable of being your own best friend. If you want a successful life, make choices that support your successful existence that also includes happiness and joy and frivolity and all kinds of things that are not necessarily under the heading of discipline, but when we apply self-discipline appropriately, then become part of that is be disciplined.
Hmm.
Like, I'm not working, so I'm not answering that text that just came in. I have to do that all the time. God, that one was hard for me. Is I had to quit answering client texts after hours because everybody deserves to be off work from now and then, or else you burn out. And that,
Sure.
again, everybody gets to make their own choices and you will know what is right for you. But if you're not happy, if you're not experiencing a thriving experience, there's a reason. And it may be because you're trying to live your life along a discipline that some other authority set out for you. Do this, do that, you'll get married, go to college, build this, build that. And if that really makes you happy, rock on. I wish for your happiness. But if it's not, then it may be because you've been trying to follow a path that was never quite meant for you. And that self discipline really comes in where you recognize your strengths and your weaknesses, what you need to do better, what you may be doing too much of, what you may be doing too little of. That if you apply self discipline to the idea of, I deserve to live the best life that I can, the healthiest, the happiest one, and to make disciplined choices that will support that, if you are struggling with the idea of self discipline, examine your goals, why you have them, and what you might wish to change to get a better outcome, and then apply your disciplined nature towards that. And, for me, I like plenty of time around trees and, jumping across streams and all kinds of stuff really, really helps me. But that if I'm too tired, I'm never supposed to push myself beyond my limits in the name of discipline. That a truly disciplined person can recognize their own limitations and to embrace them as a part of who they are.
Hmm.
Never use self-discipline as a self-punishing technique, and you'll become better friends with it, and then it will aid your journey and help you harness your willpower and help you manifest everything that you're hoping for. But expect things that you hope for to change as you heal. Because as you heal, you find that your needs become lesser and that you really are you can prioritize your emotional wellness a lot more over the expectations around a society that mostly wants us just to buy things. um, but most of like the framework around the idea of discipline is about like how much money are you making for yourself and others and how much stuff are you buying. It's like, remember, there's an agenda behind that, and like
Oh, yeah.
that's it's there's just an agenda behind that. It's about supporting an economy, not about supporting your happiness. And that, again, so many times the idea of discipline is applied to meeting a conforming standard, and that the best actual use of self-discipline is to find out what you wish your standards to be and how to inhabit them. And one of the ways that self-discipline comes into play is it gives you the freedom to be unconcerned with how other people might judge your choices as long as they're benefiting you and making you happier and healthier. And one of the easiest representations of that I've had on the show was Steph from Steph and Clover, who did the corporate journey for 15 years and then went off to like live in her Jeep and travel the country with her dog. And she has the best life I've seen. Now, could I be having that way? No, I'm a Taurus. I want to have a bathtub and a really good bed. And like, I'm a creature of comfort. But she has adventure and she's happy and she's never trapped. And she freed herself from the idea that what other people think about her life should determine what she thinks about her life. And in some ways,
Hmm.
it's the most disciplined existence that I've seen. It has become more and more,
Yeah.
but it is happier and happier. And to work with the idea that if discipline can yield results that you will be happy with, if you do not have a positive relationship to the idea of discipline, examine how you're applying it to your life and what you expect it to do for you. Because to be self disciplined means that the efforts that you put in will be yielding the results that you are working towards. That's what happens when you're disciplined. And if they're exhausting you, then why is that ever something that you would allow into your life? And to question that, to try and have self discipline around healing and happiness and well being, as well as achievement, because it just doesn't do as much for people as they think it will. I
Hmm.
just met somebody the other day, who, and this is not a client, so I'm pretty free to share the story, who they had bought this beautiful, beautiful house and they were now house poor. And this poor person, just like every single moment of their life, they had to work so very, very hard to keep this house that they kept missing the life that they no longer had, a simpler life, because now they had bundled on this responsibility that looks really important to other people, but like in reality there's a problem with the electrical panel in the house, and like all they're ever doing is working to maintain this facade that other people will approve of, when in reality they were much happier living in a rental. And
Yeah. No. No.
that it's not a successful life if your discipline leads you to greater and greater responsibility that does not then make you happier or feel as if you are contributing to your own existence as well as to the money making machine of a capitalistic society. And no, don't get me wrong, capitalism's been really kind to me. But to remember, if you're not happy, take your disciplined nature and to put it towards what will make me happier and healthier, because that's where discipline really helps us the most. Any closing thoughts, Jacob? Because we want to get you out of here because you, dude, are tired. He's doing this on a holiday weekend top of everything else. You're really very good about that, Jacob. Thank you. But do you have any closing thoughts on
I
it?
think that you hit it up there at the end. I just use myself as an example. I mean, that story is relatively similar to mine, and that the discipline that I've been, I guess, enforcing is the discipline to keep achieving or to keep like striving for stability or whatever. But then I wake up one day and I realize I'm not pursuing the things that I want to pursue anymore. I'm not enjoying life anymore because there's just no time for any of it. And I'm really good about telling people not to allow themselves to be slaves to capitalism or whatever. But then I realized that that's who I am. That's the life that I've allowed myself to live. And I feel bad for taking time off. I feel like I have a trip in September coming up that I'm already stressed about. I'm off this upcoming weekend for my birthday, and I'm stressed about that. And it's like, why am I stressed about not being at work. Like it should be the opposite, right? And so yeah, just need to follow my own advice, I guess, more than anything, and just remember that sometimes discipline, like, is maybe the power to say no, this isn't serving me anymore, and you know, maybe try to find a life that has more life in it, and not so much responsibility.
Right. Use your self-discipline to give you the life that you want versus the life that other people think you should have.
Yeah,
All right, guys. So that was uncharacteristically rather short episode, considering that sometimes I really do go on. But I think you guys get the point. Self-discipline is an integral part of having a successful life, but an integral part of having a successful life is determining what does success really look for me? What does it look like for me? And why? And to not try and inhabit a painting that somebody else made of your life because it never works out. It never works out. Figure out through your own discipline, through your ability to pursue the best use of your expression of power, which is what discipline is, what you're meant to be taking your discipline actions towards. And for some people, it really can be doing things like, traveling the country in a Jeep Cherokee. Or for some people, it can be, for me, I had to, I just kept running out of energy. I burned out really badly. Is I had to reapproach how much I was working to get better results to make sure I was doing the work that I thought was important as well. And that I realized that when I was approaching self discipline, that my personal happiness was something that I was not being disciplined about at all, when that is the thing that will most likely yield the best results in my life. And what anybody else thinks of that, listen, I'm not somebody who courts a lot of societal approval as it is anyway. So it doesn't matter. I'm not going to let it start mattering to me now. So if other people don't approve of it, that's fine. They can go live their own self-approved existence. But to use your self-discipline to build the life that you want, and then you will truly have harnessed your power, because at the root of it, self-discipline is actually your willpower that you're applying in a disciplined manner, but to never have discipline be punishing to yourself, because it will always lead to burnout. It will always lead to disillusionment, and it will always lead to a loss of your connection to the divine, or to any source of guidance, or to a feeling of being in alignment with your higher self. Everybody has a different approach to their own spiritual connection, and at whatever path you're following is the right one for you. But that if you're looking for how to apply self-discipline to your life, apply it in the way that will give you a better life, and that is never about beating yourself up for what you didn't do, but rather harnessing the energy of what you can do in a focused and a directed manner. This has been Logical Magic, examining esoterica, the big talk on self-discipline. Wasn't it fun? You can find me at therisingmoon.com to book me for a tarot card reading or a life coaching session. I have a Patreon. I think I probably mentioned it at the top of the show, but I'm going to talk about it again here because it's the closing. And you can find me at Cronecast at the Rising Moon as well on YouTube. And then Jacob, Southern Style Readings on Facebook, or he's also SouthernStyleReadings at gmail.com. Although I think he's a little bit burned out from his other job, he's actually an excellent reader, and I suggest you check him out. Jacob, thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
thanks, you too.